Completion is commonly defined as the action or process of finishing something. The concept of completion can be applied to a number of things, but it's most commonly seen in context of video games. Osu completion may be the hardest challenge in the entire game, as it requires a player to submit a score on every single ranked map. Some maps are far too hard to full combo and others are too hard to pass, so we just count any submitted score for completion. This doesn't mean that completionists just D-rank everything. In fact, they usually try to set the best score possible on every single map they can. Just play each difficulty of each beat map set in the whole game to the best of your ability, and you've done it. With an increasing amount of beat maps being ranked every single day, the challenge only becomes more daunting over time. Despite this fact, 2 players have now stepped up and, for a time, been able to fully complete OS. Zasuma started playing OS in 2013 and would end up becoming a fairly good player who was capable on a variety of maps. After playing for PP for a few years, he turned towards the score rankings with the personal goal of becoming the #1 score player. By playing many different ranked maps, he was able to eclipse the other players, and in no time he reached top 50, top 10, and eventually #1 in 2017. Once he had created a large gap between himself and the rest of the competition, he realized that to keep motivation for playing, he needed a new goal. This goal, of course, completing every single ranked OS standard beat map. The undertaking of which no one had ever been dedicated enough to try, at least since the early days of OS when there were only a handful of maps. Already having played thousands of maps in his quest to #1 score, he was closer than most players, but still quite a ways away from actually completing everything. For the next 2 years, Zasuma worked, grinding out beat maps each time he played, slowly inching closer and closer to completion. It was taxing for him, both physically and mentally, but as he kept going, more people would take notice and cheer him on to the finish line. On April 27th, 2018, after playing a total of 60,845 OS beat maps, he submitted the last score needed, and at this moment, Zasuma became the first completionist. Our second completionist is one that was greatly inspired by the pioneering work of Zasuma and wanted to do just as he did. Przegrany, which means loser in Polish, started playing in 2015 and followed a similar path. Playing just for PP lost its appeal over time, and he then shifted towards other forms of competition in-game like the score ranking. Beginning the journey to complete OS Standard on August 10th, 2019, he would dedicate himself as much as possible to the goal. Playing multi-hour sessions, Przegrany would break down the remaining maps into categories, such as maps ranked in a certain year or those of a certain star rating range. Using these smaller milestones made completion that much more manageable in the long term, and made progress easier to track. Even though he wasn't as good as Zasuma skill-wise, he would try his best on each map and his dedication would bring him a long way. Many new maps would be ranked though, with almost 18,000 new ones in 2019 and 2020 alone, making the task of completion harder as more days passed. Shooting up through the score rankings thanks to the sheer number of maps played, completion would seem closer and closer as 2021 came. By August 11th, 2021, Przegrany became the second completionist after setting a score on 82,298 maps. Most of which over the course of only 2 years. As of the publishing of this video, Zasuma and Przegrany are the only 2 players who have completed OS, but that could change in the future. At any time, there are a handful of people working towards completion of the game despite the growing size of the ranked category. Completion remains one of the hardest, if not the hardest, challenges in OS, requiring years of dedication and effectively thousands of hours of playtime. Players are always pushing the boundaries of what is thought possible, and completion is one clear example of pushing what a single person can be capable of.